Hello, everybody. This is Derek's stream. Welcome back. It's been a while since we've done a stream quite like what we're going to be doing today. Today is more about kind of more of a collection kind of related stream, obviously, as opposed to me. First things first, I want to give some credit. First of all, I haven't given him credit in a while, and that's Chris over at Classic Gaming Quarterly. Chris, one of the things, he's been a streamer, obviously, since 2009. He's just been a really good source of encouragement to continue to stream. Really, content creation is something I think is important, and I think it's something where you can have it reflect whatever passions you may have, and obviously gaming is something that both him and I guess, enjoy. And so I never started this right about a year ago as everyone was getting used to hunkering down with the pandemic and you had time on your hands. And I was getting used to recording myself for my day job as a high school teacher. And I kind of became used to kind of just being on camera and recording myself. So I thought, why not? And while I'm certainly not going to be scaring any major video game YouTuber with my amount of views, I'm very appreciative for the people that have shown up and talked or whatever. If you have a question throughout the stream, please talk and interact and ask questions. I may know the answer, I may not. I won't claim to be a perfect expert. So like I said, these what this really is are games that I've picked up in the last few months, probably the last 4 months or so, at least the ones that I think I picked up in the last 4 months. So probably stuff that would not be seen if you looked at any of my other collection videos, which I've made about 5 or 6 of those. So we'll start off with this one. I think this might help. It's a little bit farther back. This is Konami's, so we'll start with the Super Nintendo. This is Konami's Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Kind of a survival horror game, as I guess you would see, kind of a top-down shooter, kind of similar to like Gauntlet, except for you're just killing zombies in kind of like your neighborhood as you're trying to survive this zombie apocalypse. And this, of course, was a game about zombies before kind of that became kind of the big thing with like The Walking Dead and whatnot. This is also the kind of game that I think from a retro gaming collecting standpoint, no pun intended, I wish I would have pulled the trigger on it a lot sooner. I can distinctly remember going to retro video game stores and seeing, tons of copies of Zombies Ate My Neighbors just sitting there with lots of other Super Nintendo games, especially, that were probably $7 or less. And I had heard about this game. I remember seeing it in stores in the boxes and never really thought too much about it. But it's really fun. From the different weapons you have to kind of some of the hilarious kind of dialogue with it, because it definitely kind of had a lighter side. I mean, obviously, you can either be funny with horror or you can be dark and dreary. And this game is definitely pretty lighthearted, and kind of makes it almost kind of hilarious that you're this teenager kid trying to survive the zombie apocalypse. So, pretty funny game. And again, like I said, it was like $7 just about anywhere. Cheap game. And now it's worth about $50. And I paid something closer to the latter amount, not the former. So I definitely wish I would have, in retrospect, picked that up when I had a chance to buy it for very little. Obviously, all these games that I'm going to show you, some of them have, obviously your own sentimental value and your, obviously your collector value. Anyways, yeah, this is a good one. And I can definitely understand why people enjoy this game because, whether you want to laugh and tease the graphics or not, I mean, there's a lot of different games that have kind of turned, I think, really the zombie ate my neighbors kind of concept and ran it with it. Like, what is it? Canadian Death Trip, which is a game on like the Switch, reminds me a lot of Zombies Ate My Neighbors in a lot of ways. Okay, so that's Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Okay, here's another Super Nintendo game. We're going to go look through a whole bunch of Super Nintendo games here. This one's a more obscure and also more valuable one. So this is Kemco's Dragon View, which is an RPG. I'm not the biggest RPG gamer myself. I think as a younger kid or as a younger person, I had more patience. I don't know what it is. I don't know if that's true for you out there watching as well. Whether, sitting down and playing a game for 4 or 5 hours as a little kid seemed to be rather effortless, other than just making, I guess the time being able, to not have other responsibilities. But now as an adult, 4 or 5 hours, it's like, what else could I be doing? And you really agonize, and you feel like if you're lucky to steal an hour or two, you're really kind of spend a lot of time playing games one day. Or maybe at least that's just how it is for me, but I don't know. It's harder for me to get involved in a game that might require, 30, 60, maybe even 100 or plus or more hours of gameplay. And so anyways, this is Dragon View by Kemco. A lot of people, of course, talk about like Final Fantasy, Secret of Mana, and some of those others. But this is really kind of I'm not going to use the term hidden gem. I know people tease people about stuff like that, but I would probably say lesser known. That's really what it is. And maybe didn't get, it wasn't quite as widely discussed. And so these games become kind of lost in the background a little bit. And this is a pretty quality one. I was lucky to come across this. I live in a small town in rural Wisconsin, and we are very fortunate to have a video game store called Games for Us. And there's not, it's a video game store. They sell other things too, like Magic the Gathering and stuff, which you can see my piles of Magic the Gathering stuff in the background. But anyways, long story short, games come to the store every now and then, although not a lot of necessarily retro games. But this was one that they gave me a phone call about. And I guess if there's anything fortuitous about living in a small town, is that there isn't too many collectors either. So I'm not exactly having to compete against a large amount of people. So I guess, for lack of a better term, they wanted to let me know that they had a pretty nice game come through the store. And so they had me come down and see it. I checked it out. I was intrigued. Yeah, it's an RPG, and I told you I wasn't. RPGs are not maybe my biggest thing, but I was intrigued, and I don't know. I just felt like I couldn't not pull the trigger on it, and so I picked it up. Like I said, it's a fairly rare game, and like I said, you never know what's going to happen. You go in the game store, and every time I always look to see if anything's come in that's intriguing, and it's always cool when something rare and unique walks in, and then, of course, I guess in a way, because I'm one of the few retro guys in the area, I can pick it up. So lucky me, I guess. Okay, this next one I picked up probably about a month or two ago. This is Run Saver by Atlas. Let me do something here. This might help. I'm just going to add, maybe this will help you see it a little bit better. Is that better? Is that better, folks? Would you guys agree? You can always say something in the chat if you want. So this is a Run Saver by Atlas. Atlas is a game publisher that doesn't make necessarily a lot of games, but I would say they make pretty damn good quality games. And usually a lot of their games, not only are they pretty well put together, good music, great graphics, tight controls, but normally they're also kind of rare because they don't publish a lot of titles, and maybe they kind of just get lost against some of the more aggressive publishers which have large amounts of games on their library. But Run Saver is definitely very heavily inspired by Capcom's Strider, and that's really kind of what the game became known for, is that it was like a Strider clone. The mechanics of your fighter, which has kind of a, if you played Strider, you know what I'm talking about. It's where you're kind of a running platformer, where you have kind of a bladed weapon, hence your saber in this game, or in Strider, your sword, and it has kind of like almost like a, use a Star Trek term, like a bathtub, like half moon blade that you'll use like almost like a force field that kills enemies. Very similar in Run Saver. I don't know. Definitely the level design is very similar. I'm almost surprised that Strider or Capcom probably didn't sue Atlas for this game, because there definitely seems to be a lot of borrowed concepts, and the games are very similar. The funny part is Strider's an okay game to me, but I enjoy Run Saver. I don't know why. I don't know if it's the music or I don't know. I mean, Strider's a reasonable game, but I wouldn't say it's like my favorite thing. I have it on. I have Strider on my arcade one-up machine, and I don't play that very often. But I do play Run Saver. I do get more enjoyment out of that for whatever reason. It might seem like I'm being hypocritical, but I enjoy it, and not a bad game. Okay, this next game is a shooter, and one that's still relatively cheap for anybody that's trying to get into shooters. Because one thing that Super Nintendo was kind of, I don't know if people were giving it as a knock for this system, but a lot of people will lament, oh, there just wasn't a lot of shooters for the Super Nintendo, and they kind of would, bemoan the fact that, there wasn't, it seemed to be a genre that the system didn't really play towards. They got a lot more credit for their RPGs, which are another very popular game format for them. But the shooters were always seen as they either felt they were letdowns, or, beyond the big three, which was really Gradius 3, Super R-Type, and it's losing me right now. Super R-Type, Gradius 3, and Darius Twin. Those are the big three for the system, and people don't really seem to think there was much more than that, but there really were. And here's one. This is Jaleco's Earth Defense Force, and Earth Defense Force is actually a pretty cool looking game. It's fairly cheap. It's only about 15, 16, maybe $15 to $20 at the most, which is as cheap as those other main shooters. The one thing you have when you start the game, you have kind of a choice of the different secondary weapon systems you have, which I like. I definitely like that feature in Gradius 3, and I like that feature in Earth Defense Force. The only criticism I would give is the fact that your ship in the game, which is kind of like this big space shuttle, you have kind of a pretty big hitbox. And your ship, I don't know, I don't think it moves that well. It's not the most agile vessel. And having a big hitbox that you can't really bob and weave and evade your opponents really makes it challenging. And especially with the many different directions that the enemies will come at you. I almost feel like you have to play it like trial and error style to find out which secondary weapon is the ideal for whatever mission you're on. And I realize that's a part of the learning process, but to me, it makes it a little bit less. I guess the learning curve a little bit kind of makes me. I don't. It's not my go-to, but it's a fun. It's a cool game. Don't get me wrong, and it's cheap. I guess that's why I understand why that one probably wasn't spoken in the same realm as those other three more popular shooters like Super R-Type, Gladiators 3, and Darius Twin. So that's Earth Defense Force. This next one I actually just recently picked up. This is a platformer. This is Metalmorph by FCI. Kind of an unusual game. I would kind of compare it to probably somewhere along the lines of almost like not Shadowrun. Blackthorn. There we go, Blackthorn. Almost like Blackthorn in a way. Hey, I see you got another person in watching. Welcome to the stream. Where you are this kind of cyborg that can change shapes into like liquid metal. Think of almost like, the T-1000 from Terminator 2. And you're going to these different planets and destroying these kind of like alien machine monsters. And it's kind of weird, but I also think it looked kind of cool. And like I said, it's not a game you see very often, so I found a copy and I picked it up. Haven't had a chance to interact with it too much other than really just seeing a long play of it, but it looks interesting. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, thanks. I have some other videos of where I really go through like a lot of my games, but today I'm just going over through some of the more recent stuff. So we'll see what happens. See if you recognize any of these other ones. So that's Metalmorph. Shingle Mill, huh? Okay, this next game is kind of another obscure one. And maybe I'm just attracted to like eclectic things. I don't know. But it's a game that ever since I heard about it, I thought it was intriguing because, so many games are, it's a platformer. It's an RPG. It's a shoot, it's a sports game or whatever. But this, so you have a lot of similar themes. It's a person in the future. It's a group of people on a fantastic quest. Well, this one kind of stuck out. This is SOS by Vic Tokai. This game is about a ship in distress. Go figure, SOS. And I guess kind of giving you the basic plot of it. The game is set in the past. It's set in the 1920s. Which that's a kind of unusual time period for video games, and especially when you consider this game was made in the 90s. I mean, how many people were talking about the 1920s? Oh yeah, you want to know what would be a really cool game? Let's talk about the 1920s. Well, it's set in the 1920s, and you're on this passenger ship, kind of similar to like the Titanic, and the ship gets caught in this horrible, horrible storm. And more or less after that, it's kind of a copy of the 1970s disaster flick the Poseidon Adventure, which of course is about a cruise ship that gets hit by a massive wave, causes the ship to capsize, and basically your job is to try to save as many people as you can, just like in the Poseidon Adventure. Gene Hackman's character, I'm dating myself, but I do actually really like this movie, even though it's ridiculous. You have to go through this ship, and of course the challenge is the ship is upside down, and so that makes moving along kind of difficult and scary, especially as the ship continues to kind of sink and struggle as the ship seems to be kind of slowly, more or less sinking, and you're hoping to get out topside onto the bottom of the ship, where hopefully you'll be rescued. And that's really kind of what the whole game is. I have not played it. I watched a long play of it, and I guess in a weird way, the game itself, while it's interesting, there's no real enemies other than just the challenges of, navigating the different obstacles on the ship, and then of course helping your fellow survivors make it along with you. So I guess the best way I could describe it is it's probably would be considered a puzzle platformer. But it's a puzzle platformer without enemies. So that to me kind of makes it kind of cool. I know that there's at least this is also a game that has multiple endings to it, depending on how many people make it, which I think that's pretty cool. You don't see too many games that have kind of a fragmented, story, where it can go and branch off in a couple different directions. But this is a game that does that. It's definitely an obscure game. You don't see it around very much. I will admit I picked this one up off of. I know for sure I purchased this online. I'm trying to think if I picked it up off of eBay or not. It is expensive too. It was close to $100, but I don't know. It was a game I wanted to try. I don't really have an emulator for Super Nintendo games, and I don't know. It's kind of a weird one, but that's kind of why I like it. So if that makes any sense. Okay, this next one you're definitely going to probably have heard of or have seen, because this is a pretty damn popular game, and that is Contra III Alien Wars, or the Alien Wars, I should say. This is a run and gun shooter, of really the classic that really made, I think, was a huge third-party game for Nintendo, and then of course this was their first installment on the Super Nintendo. I don't think there was a second one, now that I remember. I don't think there was a Contra 4 for it, at least not for Super Nintendo. But this game's pretty awesome. They even, the fact that, that it was popular enough that they included it with the Super Nintendo Mini kind of tells you that this was a game that people really, really wanted to play again. And it's super fun. It's challenging, but not too hard where it's just Rage Quit City. I have Contra Hardcore for Sega Genesis, and that game is Rage Quit inducing. That game is almost cruel in how it beats you up. I think it's difficult, but I don't think Contra 3 is like I said, where you're so frustrated you feel like you don't have a chance. I can regularly get to stage 3 or 4, and to me that gives me hope that with more practice, I guess I could advance and beat this game. The visuals are really cool. Of course, since it's a Super Nintendo game, some of the levels really feature Mode 7 graphics with that kind of rotational stuff, especially when you're on the stage when you're on the road system, shooting aliens, and then you have the boss that kind of floats around and keeps trying to land on top of you. Kind of similar to like if you ever played the game Granada from from Sega Genesis. But it's a fun game. I love the visuals on it, and like I said, it's a run and gun shooter. There really isn't much more that needs to be said. And yes, spread weapon's awesome. So is homing missiles in this game. Those are pretty much money weapons as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I had not had this in my collection ever. And I don't know, I guess I thought, hey, it's really not that expensive. It's, it's about a $30 to $40 game. And I thought, yeah, I want this one in my library. So even though I have it on my Super Nintendo Mini, I still decided to pick this one up, and I'm glad I did. Okay, since we're still talking Konami, and we've kind of already mentioned some of the shooters that they had available on their systems, there's this one. This is Axelay. Now, Axelay is another shooter, and when you consider Konami, of course, Konami's the developer that made and brought us more famously Gradius. And Gradius is typically a side scroller. At least most of their editions on the Super Nintendo were, and very popular. But a lesser known one is Axelay. And what makes Axelay different from the other shooters is that unlike whether it's vertically scrolling or side scrolling kind of games, like whether it's Space Megaforce or STG Strike Gunner, this one, your perspective is as though you're flying behind the ship and you're flying towards the screen, almost kind of like Space Harrier style in a way. And that gives a different kind of gameplay feel as the enemies move towards you. I haven't played it too much. I remember seeing this game as a kid and thinking it looked really interesting. And Konami, does a really great job. Usually, two things you can always guarantee yourself, usually with a Konami game, is the graphics are probably going to pop. And two, the music's going to be great. And I have little doubt that Axelay probably has both those elements. And I really can't wait to give this one more of a try and fire it up and see how it goes. But yeah, Axelay is, like I said, another one of those shooters, like I said, that, people don't maybe know too much about or talk too much about, but definitely a worthwhile get and unique among the shooters, even on the system. I don't think there's another shooter really quite like it on the Super Nintendo. So it kind of, in a way, for its own perspective, it stands by itself. So that's kind of cool. Okay, next, I'm going to kind of change directions just slightly. I'm going to show you some recent stuff. Now, I hope I didn't put this on another pickups video. If I did, I apologize. Not that anyone would really maybe know, but I don't know. I guess I feel like I have to. So we'll start with this guy. Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I'll probably have to hold it up here. PlayStation 5. Now, first things first, I wish I could tell you something about PlayStation 5. I can't because I don't have one. But I've already purchased, at least, as you're going to see, just these two games. So I guess you could say I'll wait to play this one. I've heard nothing but good things about this game so far. I heard the raiding of villages is truly fun. One of my a local friend of mine, he has it for PlayStation 4 and enjoys it immensely. So I'm just going to wait for the PlayStation 5. I try regularly to try to pick one up, but I don't know. It's really tough. Someone will tell you it's going to drop, and then boom, you know, it feels like you have no chance. So it'll eventually get it. I'll be patient. I'm not in a huge hurry. I got enough other games that I could get around to, but I'm looking forward to playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I realize that Assassin's Creed games are in probably ways very much the same, just a different, character, different time period, but I've always found them to be really interesting. And I don't know, I always thought it was a really cool series. I will admit it kind of lost me when they killed Desmond. I'm sure that's true for a lot of people that were Assassin's Creed fans, because they kind of felt kind of used. But I guess I'm going to give this PlayStation 5 version a chance, and who knows, maybe I'll fall back in love with the series the way I did the first time. Okay, and the other PlayStation 5 game I have, my brother gave this to me for Christmas, is Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. I am a bit of a military historian, I guess, or that's part of my job at school. And I like Call of Duty games, but when Call of Duty started going into like the future, that's kind of where they jumped the shark with me, and I stopped caring. And so I stopped playing those games. But a game that would play in real history, like, whether it was World War II or World at War or the first Black Ops game, I really enjoyed that. And I've heard good things about Cold War, and I'm looking forward to playing this as soon as I can. So, because it doesn't go in the future, and to me, I don't know, it just doesn't have any interest for me. If I want something like that, I'd play, Halo or something like I don't know, even like Doom or something like that, if I really wanted to play a game quite like that. So, this is a game I'm looking forward to playing. Okay, I got a few other 16-bit stuff. This is a Sega Genesis game. This is Eternal Champions. I'll kind of admit this was kind of an impulse buy. You know how, like, when you're a little kid, and you go to the grocery store, they'll have, like, candy bars or something near the cash register with the hope that, little kid will go, I want that, and mom and dad would be like, okay, and they'll, you'll get yourself a candy bar. Well, Eternal Champions was kind of like that for me. I saw it sitting there, and it's a fighting game, kind of like Sega's entry into like the fighting games that were really popular, especially because of Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter 2 was always such a huge thing. It was kind of the two big ones, and everyone was trying to jump in on the fighting game bandwagon, so to speak. And so this was their entry, and I saw it, and they wanted like $6 for it. And I'm like, why not? So that was my candy bar near the cash register. It was a Sega Genesis game. It's not in the best shape. It's not complete in box. It's just that, and I don't know. I just thought it. I'm like, why not? Pull the trigger. It's $6, big deal. So it's not worth much more than that, to be perfectly honest. I think it's worth literally like $5 or $6. So from a collecting thing, it's not going to win any. It's not going to make anybody ooh and ah. But I don't know. It was just a game that was there, and I took an opportunity, I guess. Okay, on a little more strange level, this is Lawnmower Man, and this is by Time Warner, and this is for the Sega Genesis. You can see this case has literally been beat to cow, which some of these Sega cases, two things I like. One thing I love about Sega cases is that, I don't think we appreciated maybe enough the hard plastic cases that they made, which were actually pretty good quality. I realized they got chewed up and kicked around, but that wasn't such a dumb idea. When you compare it to what I'm going to show you guys later, with some other cases that were around, this was much better, and certainly better than the little slip-on plastic that you put on at the bottom of Super Nintendo games. Those were kind of stupid and really just got in the way. But these cases, held up a lot better, and they look nice on the shelf now, even though this one has definitely seen better days. But anyways, Lawnmower Man. This was a game based on the film The Lawnmower Man, which is about a guy who is part of a project which is really kind of like in the late 90s, kind of the big future item that people discussed was virtual reality. And I find it really kind of interesting that with, like modern, like our society today, like, VR has kind of definitely come back. I mean, now with the modern consoles, you can have VR experiences that, only people in the 90s could have ever dreamt of, where you feel like you're immersed in a virtual world. And I haven't gotten into VR yet. I'd like to. And so this was kind of an attempt from a 16-bit standpoint to replicate what was shown in the film, where you're like in a virtual world. But the game is really kind of weird. But yet unique in its own strange way. Like, you have to give them credit for trying to replicate something that was really beyond the capabilities of the system that they were, so they're taking something that they created probably through a computer, a much more advanced interface, and obviously far better processing, and something that was engineered by designers, to here now trying to shove it onto some kind of 16-bit game. And I admire them for their attempts to try to create something that was probably well above the capabilities of the system. So there's these different kind of virtual worlds which are based on experiences from the film that are in the game, but there are other parts of the game that are just random and strange, and to be honest, kind of dumb. But I wanted the game because a guy in the film who played, I think, who was the Lawnmower Man, was a guy from a TV series I enjoyed. And I noticed that he had credits for being in the video game Lawnmower Man. I thought, why not? I knew the game was probably cheap, and it is. It's only about $15, I think, $12. So I managed to find a copy, and it was completed box at a store, and they only wanted like $10 for it. So I bought it. I mean, it's chewed up. It's certainly not worth a perfect price, but I don't know. It's a unique game. It'd probably be a really good game if like you were drunk or something, because it's kind of trippy, which is kind of what the movie was like. It was kind of meant to be kind of a out of your body experience. So anyways, kind of interesting one. Okay, now we're going to go through some Nintendo games. I actually streamed this one last week, and it's perhaps timely considering the movie that's out. It's Godzilla, Monster of Monsters. This is by Toho. Toho only, I believe, made 4 games. Thank you, John Riggs, for telling me that. They're also famous, at least for Super Nintendo circles. Toho was the publisher for Space Megaforce, which is probably the best shooter on the Super Nintendo. But anyways, Godzilla Monster of Monsters is an interesting game. You play both Godzilla and Mothra as you're basically trying to stave off an alien invasion of our solar system. And so what you do is you fight through these stages where you're getting shot at by like, I guess like whatever like defense forces these aliens are using, like ray guns or what look like a kind of like, if you remember from the Battle of Hoth from Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, the little like satellite dish weapon where it like gains energy and then fires out this pulse. There's weapons like that in there, and so you're Godzilla or Mothra, and you're going through and smashing or shooting if you're Mothra these different devices and trying to make it through the stage, and then occasionally you'll fight these alien bosses like a squid-looking thing, like it's called Gareva, I think. Another one's kind of like a Mecha Godzilla kind of thing, and a couple other major bosses, and you're just kind of working your way through it. Now, the game itself isn't too bad. The problem with it is just so repetitive. So you get put in these kind of hex overworld screens, and so you're kind of having to do the same thing one hex at a time, maybe 4 or 5 times, and it gets really, really repetitive. It's the same thing over and over again, and yeah, you can sit there and kill a lot of time, but you're doing the same kind of mindless button mashing. There's not a lot of nuance to it, and I don't know. After playing it, I played it literally for almost 2.5 hours last week, and I just kind of got bored with it and quit. It's not a horrible game. I mean, I like the graphics. I like the fact that you can be 2 different monsters. But the part that, of course, was lacking was just it just didn't have enough variety. It needed more variety, and it just doesn't. I mean, even the stages are very similar in layout, so there's not a whole lot to it. So the game kind of becomes a mindless grind, if that makes any sense. So that's Godzilla Monsters and Monsters. They did make a sequel to it, and that's a very different game unto itself. I don't have that, but that's like where it's almost like from a third-person perspective. It's really weird. This one is another game based on a movie. This is The Hunt for October. I also played this game very briefly, I believe, last week. This was one of my favorite movies. I can virtually quote the whole damn thing. I do so much to the chagrin of my wife. This, of course, is a video game based on the movie, which was based on Tom Clancy's book, The Hunt for October. I read the book. The book is very different from the film. I'd recommend the film over the book, by the way. You don't always hear that. And this is by High Tech. Beyond the very first screen of this game, where it tells you like the scenario of what the Red October is about, after that, there's absolutely nothing like the film in the game. So if you're hoping to relive, Jack Ryan's tremendous adventure, it's not. It's really an underwater shooter. It's kind of stupid. I mean, I'm not a real big fan of it. It's mostly frustrating. That's really what it is. Has some things in there that make the game difficult, I think, for no reason, like a timer, which I hate timers in games. I don't know. Call me weird, but if I'm going to play it, let me enjoy it. Don't stress me out. And that just makes the game artificially difficult than it maybe needs to be. But not a real great game. The only thing that's nice about this game is that it's still cheap. I also have the Super Nintendo version of this as well, and it's not much better. Okay, now for a really unique game, and I got to give credit to my friend Justin Caesar. Justin Caesar, he's a comedian. He's hilarious. Look him up. Justin Caesar, just like Julius Caesar, Caesar. He's a pretty hilarious individual. There are some YouTube clips of him out there. But anyways, this was a game he kind of, I guess you could say, told me about that he remembered playing as a kid. And this is the Magic of Shaharzad. Of course, it's part of one of those tales of the Arabian Nights. And this is a really unique game. Part of it is like kind of a top-down action game, kind of similar to that of Crystalis or Zelda, the first one, where you're the hero, you're named after whoever you are. So whatever you want to call your hero's name, and you're walking around, and there are parts where the enemies will walk up to you, and you just slash them with your sword, right? Pretty simple stuff. Well, there are other enemies that you're going to face where it stops, and then it's like playing an RPG, where think of it playing like Dragon Warrior or Final Fantasy, where there'll be kind of turn-based combat. And so the weird part about it is you don't know which one's gonna happen. You don't know the moment when it's gonna be, okay, it's turn-based combat now, or now it's just hack and slash as I'm moving through this world. And then the whole time, of course, just like with any other RPG, you're picking up items, you're meeting with people, you're talking to every single person you can, right? Can't leave anything, any hint or clue left out. And I played the game for about an hour. It has a ridiculously long password system. I play these games on a simple Classic 2. There's no save states, or it doesn't have a internal hard drive, so I would have to write down those ridiculously long passwords, and I don't know whether it's principle or whatever. I just didn't. I guess if I had my phone with me, I could take a picture and do that and punch it back in. But honestly, it's like literally punching in the nuclear launch codes. I mean, it's ridiculously long. Whoever did that was mean, because you're talking about like kids playing this game. I mean, and that's in the day and age when we all had their little code book or whatever. But this password system's even worse than Faxanadu or Fazanadu, however you want to pronounce it. And that game had ridiculously long passwords. This is worse, which that's saying something. But the gameplay is really unique. Like I said, the genre is unique too, of course, being set in, while it's somewhat fantastic, it's kind of grounded with someone, a different kind of genre a little bit. But definitely a very unique game, again, by Culture Brain. And I would definitely encourage people to pick this one up. It's not one you hear about. And I'm really glad Justin told me about it. Okay, this next one's pretty interesting. I would call this a puzzle action game. This is Kesas Ring by American Sammy. I did stream this a little while ago. Pretty fun. I actually got to, and it's got a ton of levels. I actually got to level 91 before basically the game killed me off. You got 10 continues, which it's a lot, but you can stretch them out. You can live a long time. You are this young kind of elfish princess, which is armed with kind of a bow and arrow, and you can get other upgrades as you go through the game. And basically what you're in search of is for keys, because those are your way to get out of the levels. There are some boss battles, but they're pretty simple. It's really just kind of a shootout when you get into your boss battles. Not a whole heck of a lot of strategy, really, but in some ways, but definitely the game ramps up the difficulty as you go along. I like it. It's unique. It's not an RPG. Kind of similar, maybe like I like to compare it to. It's like if Bomberman and the Legend of Zelda had a baby. That's kind of what this game is. So it has the puzzle element of Bomberman, and then the fantasy element of course, The Legend of Zelda. So if that sounds interesting to you, you should try to pick up a copy of this one. It's a little more expensive because it's a little more obscure Nintendo game, but I think it's about $50 or so. But I think it's well worth it. Here's a game that's cheap and readily available. This is Star Soldier, and this is by Taxan or Naxat in Japan. This is the first of the Soldier series, which of course would culminate into like the PC Engine's Soldier Blade series. It's a vertically scrolling shooter, very challenging. It can kind of kick your butt. The upgrade systems are challenging. The ship you kind of have is kind of dopey looking, but it's okay. But definitely a game that can get you kind of frustrated. But it's cheap. You can usually acquire this game for $10 or less, and it's from a good series. I want to say Hudson Soft helped is one, or yeah, could be wrong. I think Hudson helped part of the programming for this one, since obviously it became a PC Engine title later. So that's Star Soldier. Here's another Taxan title. This is Burai Fighter. This is kind of a side-scrolling shooter, kind of similar to like Section Z or Legendary Wings on the side-scrolling stages from Capcom. Kind of a unique one. I remember seeing this every now and then at magazines. Sometimes I'd see the cover art and I always thought it looked kind of neat. Of this sort of modern-looking guy going against like this big serpent dragon kind of thing. Kind of an interesting thing. You have kind of different directional shooting that you can do in the game, which is kind of convenient. Instead of just shooting straight forward like a lot of side-scrolling shooters are, this one you can angle it and shoot in a variety of different directions towards your enemies, which I think that's kind of a cool little controlling dynamic. So that's Burai Fighter. I think I already talked about that, so I won't mention it. Here's another kind of shooter. This is Cobra Command by Data East. By the way, if you have any questions out there, feel free to ask or comment or whatever. I'd love to hear from you. Shingle Mill's already had, and I hope you're still watching, buddy. But as we can see, this is Cobra Command, kind of a helicopter kind of shooter game, kind of similar in some ways to, whether it's like Tiger Heli or Twin Cobra. Those are pretty popular ones. This game was around too. I remember seeing it. It just kind of got lost in a mix of games that were kind of all similar. So, it didn't really do anything to stand out. Game's still pretty cheap. You can have this one, or you can pick up games, Cobra Command for $10 or $12. If you're paying more than that, you're paying way too much. So I don't know, pretty simple arcade port by Data East. Okay, now for a very unusual game with kind of a unique story. This is and maybe it's kind of timely because of our pandemic. This is the Mutant virus, Crisis in a Computer World. And the virus, of course, they're talking about is not an actual like medical virus like COVID-19, but rather, of course, a computer virus. So what you are, the game is about this virus that's been put into this computer. And so their way to solve it is to have you be miniaturized, and then you go and fight the virus in the computer. Like think of it like, it's kind of like fighting a fire. And the fire, of course, is the virus. And you're like a firefighter. So you're going in there to try to lock down this destruction, the slowly progressing destructive element that is the virus. And that's kind of what you do. I guess when I started looking up more about this game, which is made by American Softworks company, they didn't make very many games, is I guess this was based on a British designer, and he created this very simple game, and then people, it kind of was like it was very popular amongst like computer gamers, and people, it had almost kind of like a cult-like following. So I'm sure they thought that, all these people would, come together to turn this into a really popular game, and they really didn't. So the game's a really obscure licensed Nintendo game, and I actually had a chance to pick it up locally at my local game store. Somebody sold it with this other group of very random Nintendo games, and unfortunately, this game, someone had dropped something on the game, and it like busted the case. And no matter how hard the person tried to reset, glue that case, and it just wouldn't work. And even when they took it out and tried it again, the game didn't work either. So I would have picked this up probably about 6 months ago, but instead I had to pick it up online later. But I'm glad I did. It's a unique, very unique Nintendo game. There's really nothing else like it, other than maybe Kicks by Toho, which is another kind of weird puzzle game where you're blocking off large sections. That's kind of how Mutant Virus is. Maybe that's how I should have described it from the start. So it's kind of a puzzle game is really what it is. But it has like the story that you're this person working your way through the different levels of this computer as the virus, of course, advances and whatnot. Kind of a weird game. Very weird. This is one I remember seeing. I thought this was kind of interesting. This is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Seta. Obviously based on the Mark Twain book, which I do remember reading as a kid. I thought this was an interesting kind of game. I'll admit I have not played it, but I just thought it was an interesting title. Again, I think you've kind of seen through some of the games that I've shown you thus far. I kind of have an eclectic collecting aspect of things. I do like weird and strange, and I know a game about Tom Sawyer seemed interesting or strange to me, and like, really, is that many kids gonna think, hey, I just read that book yesterday, let's play a video game about it? I don't know. Could they learn about Tom Sawyer through playing the game? I don't know. That would be something I'd have to do to be able to tell you, but that's, I always find it funny when, you throw different kind of random stories. And, I guess that's one thing I will say about the older days of video games is they're more willing to try stuff that I think today, unless a focus group says it's awesome or they think it's interesting, they won't try it. Unless some indie developer, it's like their own little passion project, they won't try it. Because the big publishers don't want anything that's going to sit on the shelf. And I bet you if they probably surveyed kids, is that something that you'd be wanting to have your parents buy for you? I don't think The Adventures of Tom Sawyer was really going to probably get a lot of 10-year-olds' attention and be like, ooh, can I have that game? They'd have been like, oh, Mom, why that? So anyways, I thought it was interesting, so I picked up a copy. Okay, a lot of people are familiar with its more popular cousins, but towards the end, Ultra, which of course was a kind of a fake or a front for Konami to sell more games because they wanted to get around the 6-game rule that Nintendo had. This is the latest one that they made. which is Skier Die. So if you might be familiar with Skater Die, which was awesome. I love Skater Die. Skier Die, and of course, that element of skateboarding was now starting to translate into skiing with, of course, snowboarding, which became and still is very, very popular. My brother was a big snowboarder. I never really got into it too much, but that was really kind of one of my brother's favorite things to do was tennis and snowboarding. And anyways, that kind of brought that element to it. And this came out a little bit later than Skater Die. And you don't see this one around too much. This didn't sell nearly as well. And then eventually Ultra they would sell that rights of the game off, and they'd actually sell it to Electronic Arts. And that's when they published Skater Die 2, The Search for Double Trouble. But Skier Die is kind of a unique one. Again, kind of similar in format where you have these different events that you can do where you're kind of like in a half pipe situation, doing different tricks for points and scores. Kind of a battle mode where you're battling other snowboarders on the slopes, obstacle kind of course kind of things. But kind of similar, really, an overall style to the original Skater Die, which I enjoyed. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I always liked Ultra games. I always thought they were kind of cool. And I kind of thought that they were kind of meant to be the cool games. Okay, so this one is a tribute to a guy who sometimes drops in my streams. I subscribe to his channel. His name's D Forte. Strongly recommend it, especially if you enjoy RPGs, especially computer ones. And one of his kind of recurring streams that he does is his working through a computer title, Wizardry 8. I think I've watched several hours of him playing games. I know I just said earlier in the stream that I don't have a lot of patience to play those games myself. I guess for whatever reason, I have less objection over to me watching somebody else go through it. So I guess if Daryl ever D Forte or Daryl ever made a mistake, I guess I'm like, well, that's his problem, right? Not mine. But I've enjoyed watching him play. He interacts with the audience really well as he plays games like that. He'll explain anything you want to know, and he really knows RPGs really well. And so, kind of as a nod to him, or tip of the cap, as they'd say, I picked up Wizardry, which is the original one on the Nintendo. I have not played it yet. I would like to give it a try just so I could tell him what to expect, because who knows, maybe Daryl would like to give this game a spin. He kind of indicated that the early ones were pretty rough. And with him, I would not doubt it, but I'm sure his standards are really high. Maybe for me, I wouldn't be so discerning about it because I just don't know. I don't have the experience he does. But I don't know. I guess I picked this one up mainly because of him and my appreciation for him in terms of his support to stream, like I'm doing right now. He's another person, along with Chris, that were very supportive of streaming anything. And while I'm sure he would probably appreciate me streaming an RPG like Wizardry, maybe I'll do that just for him. Maybe that'll be something I'll do in the near future, just to as a tip of the cap to Daryl for all the times I had watched him play Wizardry 8. So there's that. Okay, this next game, I will admit, I had seen many places, but I never picked it up. And this game's kind of hilarious and kind of frustrating. This is Caveman Games by Data East. And I first saw this really, I guess you could say, on John Riggs' channel. John Riggs does mainly retro game stuff, particularly Nintendo and Super Nintendo. But he also does some pretty cool stuff on game repairs, which I'm going to mention that briefly, and those kinds of things. I am not handy, so I really appreciate when, I hear things from like John Riggs about simple fixes, and he tries to be very informative and helpful. But anyways, one of his things he also does on his channel is lately he's been going through the Nintendo library and reviewing and ranking all the games made by various publishers. And so on his Data East ranking video, I got to see for the first time Caveman games. And Caveman games is like literally the Caveman Olympics. You can either be a caveman or cave woman, and you go through these various events that are meant to be like, I guess, what someone would think would be in the Olympics in caveman times, which of course it's ridiculous. But the thing that makes it kind of funny is the cavemen are very reminiscent of like cartoon cavemen that you would have seen like in your Sunday, like the funnies section of your newspaper. I know that's like an ancient thing. So for those of you that are young and don't remember what the funnies were, every Sunday usually there would be this thick, maybe 2 or 3 pages of the newspaper, especially if you were picking up like at a like a major metropolitan area, like let's say the Twin Cities or Chicago or New York or whatever, San Francisco. And there would be this funny section where there'd be like 2 or 3 pages of various cartoons. Everything from the Peanuts series with like Charlie Brown to I'm drawing a blank. Wow, this is great. Garfield would be in there. Sometimes there would be The Far Side by The Far Side would be in there. But they also had, other ones that were kind of goofy, whether it's I don't know. I'm drawing blanks on these funnies, which is sad, but I hope you understand what I'm talking about. But anyways, the characters are drawn very much in a funny-ish or that kind of classic newspaper cartoon way. And the game is surprisingly colorful, very bright. In fact, the game is kind of reminiscent of what you see out of like games for like the PC Engine, which that kind of caught my eye. Like, wow, this is a really colorful game. The sprites are kind of big. The different contests you do are ridiculous, which is what you'd expect. Like, for instance, there's a pole vaulting contest. Now, because it's it's caveman times, and supposedly human beings and dinosaurs were together, even though that's not true. When you're pole vaulting, your job is to take this kind of slinky tree-looking pole pole that you're using, and you gain speed, and then you plant the pole just before you get to this cliff. And then, of course, you vault yourself over what is this like waiting dinosaur. And if you're short, the dinosaur will, have an easy lunch. He'll jump right into his mouth and you're dead. But if you're lucky, you'll fly over the dinosaur and land on the other side, and yay, you cleared it, right? Well, that's like one of the events. But one of the more hilarious things in the game is called the mate toss, where if you're a caveman, you take your cave woman wife and you swing her around and you try to throw her as far as you can. It's hysterical. The controls, though, are brutal. They're really crappy. So the game looks nice. It does not control well. I'd like to use my NES Advantage on the mate toss because I think that will make it work a lot better. But it is a pretty funny game. It's one of those games where you might get about 10 minutes of laughter, and then after that, you're like, okay, let's shut this off. But that 10 minutes of laughter could be worth it, right? It could be. Good thing it's not an expensive game, and it's still fairly available out there, but that's Caveman games. Okay, next, a PlayStation 1 game. Now, this is kind of old school, folks, but this is Cyberia. Now, Cyberia is a space shooter, a rail shooter, kind of similar to maybe like Star Fox or Panzer Dragoon. If you've played those for either like the Sega Saturn or the Super Nintendo or whatever. Kind of interesting game. I swear I thought I saw this reviewed by Metal Jesus, but I'm not sure. But I saw this, I don't know, when I was at the video game store locally in town. I got on the subject of the long box games that PlayStation had. Early in PlayStation's life, the boxes they chose to go with were these long box style. Now, they had a couple different versions of it. They had a cardboard version, which was just straight cardboard. But then they had this hybrid black plastic version. And this is actually, I think, the best version. This is the one I wish they would have gone with if they wanted to stick with the long boxes, because it holds up the best. Unfortunately, they would go to these tall jewel cases, and those were notoriously flimsy and fragile. They'd break, they'd crack, they were terrible. The worst case ever made by far. But this one has this black plastic case. I have not played the game yet, but it looks kind of interesting. It's by Interplay. In the year 2027, apparently, this is supposed to be. So just 6 years from now, this is where we're going to be. We're going to be fighting in space. This game says so. I didn't believe it either. But I don't know. It was unique. I never really had seen it before. Never had a chance to pick up a case like this one, so I did. I guess you could almost argue I bought it because of the case as much as the game. But I do like rail shooters, and this one, like I said, looked interesting to me, and so I just thought I'd give it a chance, give it a home. Okay, my last two games are Sega Saturn games, and this first one, I got to give Chris at Classic Gaming Quarterly credit for it. This is The Last Gladiators digital pinball. I love playing pinball. It's one thing I've definitely missed because of the pandemic is going to Tilt in Minneapolis and playing pinball, or going to some of the other locales around the Twin Cities area. I don't live in the Twin Cities anymore, but when I do go home, I have some friends that are very much pinball's their big jam. That's their jam. And we go to the different places and play on different machines, both really current brand new ones, like let's say like the brand new Iron Maiden machine or Total Nuclear Annihilation, but also, classics, Medieval Madness, Monster Party. Those are really cool games. And this is kind of brings that pinball experience to the Sega Saturn. Of course, that's nothing new. Video games have been doing that for a long time. And I don't know. I just decided to jump on this because I do enjoy pinball. I do have my own pinball machine in my basement here. I think I showed that on my game room tour video. I could probably link that if you want to check that out. But anyways, I enjoy pinball, and Chris enjoyed this one a lot when he was kind of doing a Sega Saturn video. And I think he did a stream and played it a little bit, and I thought it looked really fun. And so I picked up a copy. This is actually a fairly reasonable Sega Saturn game. And since it's in nice shape, and of course, here's the tall jewel case I was just talking about. And these are notorious for cracking and being beat up. This is a terrible, terrible design, but if they look nice, they look pretty sharp. But the problem is doesn't take much for them to get messed up. So that's Last Gladiators. This next game, I just fired it up actually just before I started streaming, and that is Duke Nukem 3. By the way, this is the final game I'm going to talk about today. This is a classic first-person shooter. Duke Nukem, I remember seeing all the time as a first-person shooter title available for like the PC, and of course, this is around the same time that you had games like Wolfenstein and of course Doom, and Duke Nukem was the other one. Those were the big three, and anybody else was just trying to kind of ride in their shadow or their wake or whatever. And Duke Nukem 3D is all kinds of attitude. um, you know, from the that's the one thing that you didn't really get much out of either Doom or Wolfenstein is you didn't hear the character talk, but in Duke Nukem they do, and it's hysterical to hear him, talking about making comments as he either acquires new weapons or as he's fighting people. It's just kind of funny, and of course it's a little bit edgier. And I don't know, I fired it up for the first time today, and I can see why people love it. Kind of floaty movement in the game, very similar to that of Doom, but definitely a fun one. And I was glad I was able to find this one completed box. I got it from SideQuest Games out of Portland, Oregon. I'd really recommend their store. They're pretty fair in prices, and the thing I love about their store is that anything, especially for retro games, you can see what you're getting. In other words, you see the picture of what you're purchasing, which if you buy other things like I sometimes do on Amazon, it's a blind purchase, and you're just hoping not to get screwed over. And, if you're spending lots of money or maybe you don't have a lot of money and you're spending a lot because you're wanting something bad, you want to know what you're getting. And SideQuest is pretty good for that. Metal Jesus kind of introduced that store to me, and I've had good luck with them. But anyways, Duke Nukem 3 is a great game. I can definitely understand what people were thinking of it. I didn't play it very much. I mostly played Wolfenstein and Doom, and had a lot of fun with both those titles. So anyways, that's my latest pickups. I'm going to continue to pick up more, and as I do, I'll probably shoot another video maybe in a couple months about those pickups. But otherwise, I'll be streaming, so maybe I'll stream tomorrow. I have the day off, so maybe I'll do that. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll even stream Duke Nukem, and you guys can all laugh at how crappy I am in it. But that's all good. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.